excited to welcome everyone back for our next session. And I will be turning it over to Gabby, I believe, to bring us into this amazing panel that we have next.
Great, welcome back everyone. I hope that you all enjoyed the breakouts and the conversations. I listened in as a fly on the wall into some of them, and it's I'm always so inspired by the creativity and the tenacity and just the way in which you're also thoughtful about how you're organizing and doing your work. So I am thrilled to be moderating this panel. As you all know, this is our 5th anniversary. This is our 5th summit. And so what an opportunity to check in with some of our incredible alums. If you were here earlier for our strategy session, we spent a few minutes reflecting on the remarkable electoral accomplishments over the past 5 years that we've had. And, we talked about the fact that the work never ends and it's not always linear, but that we're totally committed to this mission of building permanent, sustained, progressive power in our state legislatures. And, this session is another really great opportunity for reflection on the work that we've done over the past 5 years. And so I'm thrilled to be here moderating this discussion with 4 of our incredible alums, 4 inspiring women who are doing incredible, important work in their legislative chambers. And they're also all members of our Purple District Network. I know we talked about that earlier, which is our national network of progressive frontliners in state legislatures. And I know I speak for all of us here at Sister District when I say how deeply proud and honored we were to support each of them in their runs for office, and how amazing it's been to, and continues to be, to watch them serve and see the incredible ways that they're serving their communities now that they're in office. So, quick overview of our panel discussion today. I'm going to provide some really brief intros about each of our 4 panelists. We'll then spend a little bit of time talking about their experiences in office and the road ahead in each of the incredibly important states that they're serving in. And then we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A, which our wonderful program associate, Ray Obiwumi, will moderate. And then we'll come back together to wrap things up. If you have questions along the way, please feel free to drop them into the chat. As always, we may not be able to get to all of your questions, but we will try. So let's dive in with some brief intros. So this is only in order of their class year at Sister District. From the class of 2018, we have Senator Mallory McMorrow from the great state of Michigan. She was elected to her first term in the Michigan Senate in 2018. She comes at this work with more than a decade of experience in product design, media, advertising. She worked with Mazda and Mattel and Gawker Media, other global brands. And as a state senator, she's really focused on increasing Michigan's competitiveness, drawing on her expertise and working to diversify the Michigan economy and make sure that everyone in Michigan has what they need to thrive and succeed. Then from the Sister District class of 2019, we have Senator Ghazala Hashmi from the great state of Virginia. She became the first Muslim American elected to the Virginia State Senate in 2019. She moved to the US as a young girl and grew up in a small Georgia town where she saw how community building and open dialogue can really bridge cultural and socioeconomic divisions and really unite people. And she really brings that into her service in the Senate. Dr. Hashmi has then spent 30 years as an educator in Virginia's colleges and universities as professor of English, among other academic positions. Then from our Sister District class of 2020, we have Senator Sidney Batch from the great state of North Carolina. She was appointed to the state Senate in early 2021. Before joining the Senate, she served in the lower chamber in North Carolina. And for over decades, she has served as a family law attorney, child welfare advocate, and social worker. And really her goal as a legislator is to improve the lives of her constituents and build a North Carolina that works for everyone. And then finally, last but of course not least, we have Delegate Briana Sewell, who is from the the sister district class of 2021 from the great state of Virginia as well, she was elected just last fall in 2021. Born and raised in PwC, Prince William County, she earned her Master's of Public Administration from American University and served her congressman, Jerry Connolly, as district director, where she led community engagement and constituent services programs. And she really brings that energy and that experience of the endless possibilities for good when compassionate leaders are really in office, and that's what she's bringing into the Virginia legislature. So that is just a brief intro to our wonderful panelists. And so to kick things off, would love to have a conversation and have folks learn a little bit about life as a state legislator. So, you know, the first question is sort of, what is it like? What's a day in the life, especially during session? Some of you are in legislative chambers that serve year round. For instance, in Michigan, others are in chambers that meet for only 60 or 90 days a year. But during session, what is it like? What's the energy like? What's the work like? Senator McMorrow, maybe you can kick us off.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. It is amazing to see all of my colleagues from around the country and so many sister district groups here. I was trying to scroll through all the attendees, and there's too many, which is a fantastic position to be in. So I am very proud to serve here in the Michigan Senate. We are a full-time legislature here in Michigan, so we do serve year-round. And it's surprising, even here in Michigan, I had somebody who is a supporter come up to me recently and asked, what do you do on your days off? And I started to kind of dig a little bit, and he pointed out, you know, you guys only work 3 days a week. So what do you do on your days off? And I think that's the big misnomer, and that is true of our members of Congress as well. So here in Michigan, we are in the Capitol 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So a typical day is waking up probably around 5, getting some breakfast, heading out the door. I commute an hour and a half from my house to the Capitol in Lansing. It's earlier if we have committee, so we have committee session. And then because we are a year-round legislature, we are always campaigning, even when we are in session. So there's typically some afternoon meetings where we are off-site. Of course, we are not using our official government buildings for campaign purposes. So finding a space somewhere in an office in town to do some call time, support some donors, have some meetings. I had a meeting this week with Emily's List to check in about 2022. Then it's back to meetings with issue organizations about energy, clean water, whatever it is that we're working on this week. And then back home, I am also a new mom. My daughter just turned 1. So it's usually getting home. I have about an hour with my daughter. I put her to bed. And then, especially now, logging on to a Democratic Club or some meeting on Zoom in the evenings. So it is a full-time job and then some. One thing I've learned over the past few years is taking advantage of breaks when we actually have them, because we know how busy it is year-round. So in Michigan, we do have a few weeks off in the summer. We have a spring break coming up, and I am really making it a point to take that time, reset, so that we can come back strong when we are back in session.
Amazing. It's such an interesting, such an interesting experience and job, such a varied set of days. You know, it's just fascinating. Curious about the Virginia Senate. You know, perhaps it's similar, somewhat different. I know you're certainly in session now. Senator Hashmi, what's a day in the life for you in session?
Well, good afternoon, Gabby, and good afternoon to everyone who's joining us. This is just an amazing, amazing group. And first of all, I just want to thank everyone at Sister District. I can't tell you what a difference you've made in Virginia and how very, very important this level of engagement has been for us. And I'm exhausted personally listening to Senator McMorrow describe all that she goes through, especially with a newborn and a young child at home. So congratulations to you and to all the work that you're doing. But Virginia is different. You're right, Gabby. We have a part-time legislature. And so during our odd years, we meet for 45 days, and during our even years, which we are in now, we meet for 60 days, and that's because we have to pass a biennium budget so that we can fund all of the programs and necessary government agencies for the next couple of years. So our days are similarly long. We typically start at 7 o'clock in the morning with committee meetings and then have our floor session in the middle of the day. Debates can be quite long-winded sometimes. Some folks like to speak a lot. And then we have, again, committee meetings and other events that stretch into the late evening. Session is exhausting, but it's really, really critical and necessary work. One thing that I'm finding, especially now here in Virginia, is the need to be quite attuned to the kind of legislation that's being proposed. We are now a split government in the sense that Republicans have taken control of the House of Delegates. They also hold the governor's seat now. And so one item that we are focused on this session in particular as Democrats in the Virginia Senate is to make sure that the progress that we were able to make in the last 2 years when Democrats held a trifecta is to ensure that the progress is not rolled back, that areas of critical effort that we've made, whether it's in education, women's reproductive health care, our gun safety regulations, that all of those critical efforts and progress, legislative progress, is maintained, and that we are able to offer a strong rebuttal to the kind of efforts that some of our colleagues are attempting to make. And so far, we've been able to hold fast, and we've been able to ensure that our progress is not chipped away in significant areas. And so we continue to do that. So a lot of my day-to-day job is spent reading the legislation that's now coming over from House GOP colleagues and ensuring that we can effectively defeat it. So it is a defensive posture for a lot of us at this point in the session.
Yeah, absolutely. During our strategy session earlier, we talked a little bit about Virginia, a state where we have endorsed in over three cycles. And of course, the setback in the House, and also so important to remember that the work that we all did in 2019 to flip the state Senate with Senator John Bell and Senator Hashmi has created a firewall again for this moment, where now, even though the Republicans do control those other two branches, Senator Hashmi and her colleagues, can really hold the line on so much of this legislation. And I think that that's such a great segue to this next question, which is all four of you are serving in divided government contexts. And certainly that presents, I'm sure, a number of challenges in terms of the legislation that you'd like to advance and all of that, and perhaps some opportunities as well. And I'm so curious for your experience in this divided government context and the challenges and opportunities to really make a difference that you've faced and how you're approaching that. So Senator Batch, maybe you could kick this one off.
Sure, it's great to see all of you today, and thank you to Sister District. You guys were instrumental in my 2020 race, so I thank you all. Serving, so I'm in North Carolina, and we have the governor, who's a very popular Democrat, but we also have Republicans in control of both chambers. So you have to get really creative if you want to be effective. And I think the really important part of being a legislator is, and I say there's two types of legislators, some of you have heard this before, is that they're peacocks and they're peahens. There are people who want to be there and show you that they're doing everything and look at me and take all the credit. And then there are people who just get to work. And when you are in a government and when you are in a chamber which has Republican control, you just have to decide who the best messenger of your legislation is. So this year in particular, in the Senate, I've been able to move two large pieces of legislation. They were absolutely my legislation, but my Republican colleagues Melania'd me and took my legislation and ran it through as their own. But it's okay, because at the end of the day, we have a child welfare omnibus bill that would not have actually gotten passed, and the lives of children in North Carolina would not be better in our foster care system, but for the work of the stakeholders that work with me on that. And so you just have to figure out how to navigate a system that is not built for you to be successful. If you're in competitive seats like myself and the rest of us on this panel, they're not going to give us wins. They don't want us to actually succeed. Just because they want to be able to, of course, win our seats. What they don't realize is that we don't care about taking the credit. The number of bills that I get passed that never have my name on them are much more important than the ones that do. because you can affect so many people, so many more people's lives. And so I think one of the things that we have to just try and tease out are who are the best messengers, and how can we still control our legislation, even if it has to move in somebody else's hands to get it through, because we understand that we don't always have the same ability to be able to have a lever of power that some of our other colleagues do.
That's incredible. And Senator Batch, I know you've been so masterful at communicating those wins, those legislative wins, even without your name, in your email program and the written communications that you've had that highlight the successes that you helped pave the way for, even as you say, if they don't end up having your name next to them as a sponsor when they do pass. And so the sort of selflessness that goes along with the work you all have to do to have that legislation get over the finish line is an inspiration in itself. And Delegate Sewell, you're new to the legislature, and this is your first session, which is really exciting. I'm sure has some challenges being in the minority now, but really curious what your perspective is in this moment. We heard a bit from Senator Hashmi about the divided government context in Virginia. I'm really curious for your experience and how that's going.
Yeah, so I will simply say that we are so grateful for our brick wall over in the state Senate. While I don't have the pleasure of being part of that, I do sit on the Education Committee. And therefore, I know that whenever I put up those no votes, that is a red flag for my colleagues and a sign and a symbol and something that they can take. And it may just serve as that one little bit of a warning sign that they should potentially take a second look. And we have all been working so seamlessly. Senator Hashmi and all of her colleagues in the Democratic Senate have just been so helpful throughout this process. I think that my greatest strength has been just the ability to sit back and listen at this moment in time and to seek out those opportunities, very similar to what Senator Batch was just noting, is that oftentimes really good legislation and really good ideas sometimes fail to have your name on it, even though you are the brainchild or the visionary behind it. And as she also noted, you don't care, because at the end of the day, you know that you are impacting and positively impacting the life of someone around you. Right now, I am actually, just as I am working on I actually have only one piece of legislation that has my name on it carried over to the state Senate. I'm still working behind the scenes on legislation for next year and seeking out all those opportunities and writing down some really good quotes and finding some unlikely partners and allies and coalition members. And one of those opportunities has been around paid family and medical leave, but most importantly, around affordable quality childcare. Here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and particularly in my district, for childcare can actually cost more than your first year of in-state tuition. And I recently joined the Military and Veterans Caucus, which is a bipartisan group of individuals from all across the Commonwealth, but serving both in the state Senate as well as in the House of Delegates. And it's actually become a big problem for our military bases and becoming an issue of national security because we don't have enough childcare resources. So it's these moments that you write them down, and therefore we know that we have found some unlikely allies that can help us with pushing a progressive agenda of actually focusing on making sure that we can ensure that women can stay in the workforce, but more importantly, that our children have the resources that they need for a promising future.
I love it. Unlikely allies, finding those unlikely allies, finding bipartisan moments where they exist in issues that really do affect folks without a partisan valence, right? Like our veterans, and the sort of creative ways that you all have found to continue to push the issues that matter most to you. I think that in this moment, I'm sure it's challenging. We have a panel tomorrow on election subversion, which, as we know, is running rampant through our state legislatures. Bills to, sort of expand the ways in which Republican-controlled chambers can audit election results and choose their own electors, perhaps, and all of this sort of stuff. Clearly, the Republicans have been really focused and quite masterful at proposing corrosive legislation in so many areas. And so I'm curious, obviously, the divided government context provides some, creates some challenges. Curious what gives you hope, or hope isn't the right word, the motivation to stay in this fight and keep fighting for what you know is right, given the challenges that you're facing. So Senator McMorrow, would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a really challenging question. I think all of our states are facing this, and many states throughout the country, but in Michigan, we had a violent attempt to kidnap the governor. We had armed domestic terrorists in our state capitol, in our state senate, above my head with weapons threatening us. And it is a constant onslaught, not just legislatively, but in terms of this tenor that we are seeing go on around the country. But it really is reminding yourself that you make a difference in people's lives every single day. And I want to share just one anecdote from this week. We had students representing March for Our Lives come to Lansing for a Citizen Lobby Day. These are kids, they're high school kids, advocating for legislation to prevent gun violence. And I met with a group of students. It was organized by students in my district, but I represent the district right next to where Oxford High School is. So we had Oxford High School students who were at our Capitol in the wake of the horrific school shooting that they just faced in November. And I sat down with a 15-year-old who, she presented kind of her remarks, and the students were advocating for safe storage legislation to require that if you own a firearm in a house with minors, that you have to secure that firearm, and for expanded mental health support in schools. And I asked her how it was going. Oxford students recently went back to school in person, and she took a moment. I think she wanted to tell me it's fine. And she said it's not fine. She said it is absolutely awful. She cannot go back into the building. She remembers hearing the screaming and the gunshots and losing her classmates. And that she has since gone back to being on virtual school. She can't go back to school in person. And I knew that some of my colleagues wouldn't even give her the time to take a meeting. But I had a few reporters who were texting me and asking me for comment. So I was able to ask her and ask her dad if she would be willing to speak to reporters. And she was. I told her, I will help you. I know it's really scary, but I know the power of the people in this building may not care, but the public does, and they need to hear her. They need to hear her voice. So we got her on 3 different news stories and coverage. And she just wrote me an email just saying thank you, because she was so nervous that nobody would care, that they would go and that nobody would listen to them, but that she is going to remember this for the rest of her life. And hopefully it makes a difference. So it's a long road ahead, but it is really days like that where we know we can make a difference. And if we get those stories out, then hopefully the general public will vote the people who are not taking action out of office. We will keep chipping away, and we will make the change that we need to make.
It's tremendous because, as legislators, of course, you have this voice and this power in that role. But you're also community organized. You're leaders in your community, right? And being able to use your position as a community leader to share the experiences of your constituents and of the people in your district and in your state is another way to affect change. So the legislation is certainly one piece of the puzzle, but using your platform in a way that advances the important causes and raises visibility is a tremendous way to approach it as well. So I think that's incredibly powerful. Delegate Sewell, curious, or actually, Senator Batch, let me ask you. What about you? What about this idea of staying in the fight and finding ways to keep the hope and the mission driving forward?
Yes, I'd say that hope is the other side, like fear is the other side of the coin for hope. And I think we're in a stage right now in our country where actually fear stepping outside of politics and just throwing in the towel will only create a void for others to step in that don't have the best of intentions for the constituents that we represent. And so it's much easier for all of us to go ahead and go home. Senator McMorrow could go ahead and huddle with her baby much more often than she gets to right now. I would love to see my kids, who when I started this process were 5 and 7. But the reason why I stay on it in it is partly because I do have boys who right now are 9 and 11, and they're cute, but they're also brown boys. And in a year, my 11-year-old will look like a threat to many individuals, right? The reality of the situation is not every single American life and every single view of which we see in the world makes us all equally safe. I worry about all the women who are likely going to face choice being at every state level when it comes to the Supreme Court this summer, unfortunately, probably striking down Roe and leaving that to all of us to be the wall that allows for women to have reproductive rights. I was talking to one of my colleagues, and she said that in Texas, of course, with the limitation of abortions, her friend, who is well-educated and well-heeled, ended up having to fly to DC in order to terminate an unwanted pregnancy. And this is a professional woman who, decided to choose to end her pregnancy, but could not do it in Texas. But there are so many other women who don't have the luxury of being able to fly to DC and spend, a few days with their friend in order to have access to reproductive health and the choice for abortion access. And so while I would love to give you guys a rosy picture of I have hope, I'm fearful that, frankly, the Democratic base is very apathetic right now and they're disengaged. And for those of us who are running in elections come 2022 this year, I'm concerned about them. And so I say that, Republicans do one thing really well. They message and they terrify. I think that we as Democrats need to not only give hope, but we also need to give fear. We all go to work every single day because we're fearful of being homeless, right? That is just the reality. And so I think we need to have serious conversations with people about why it's important and give them a reason to vote other than, I hope it gets better, but this is what's going to happen. And it'll be much worse if you decide to go ahead and sit out the fight with regards to that. So it is not an easy time to be a woman in politics. It's not an easy time to be a Democrat in politics. We're still doing it and I will continue to do it. It's a great honor, but I do think that if we don't change the way that our country and the direction our country is going, it's going to be very difficult for you to get anyone to go ahead, especially women, to run for office, given the caustic environment that we have to deal with every day.
Absolutely. And so the urgency of the moment is a driver for you as well in staying in the fight, because it's required, because someone has to do it, and we have to take that stand. And I think that what you're saying so powerfully is that we can't just be on defense all the time. We have to be on offense, and our messages have to convey that sense that we're pushing towards something as opposed to just pushing back against something all the time. And you're right. Earlier in our strategy session, we spent a lot of time talking about how the political environment is tough this year for Democrats, full stop, period, for so many reasons. And, and that's certainly on our mind. One piece of that that may be a benefit or a detriment this year, depending on what state you're in, is the consequences of redistricting. Certainly it's been a mixed bag, let's put it that way, real mixed bag. And I know we're all curious to get a sense of what is, sort of what the outcome has been in your states. And Senator Batch, we'll start with you because it's hot off the press, right? These lines have just been finalized. The final potential appeal has been denied. And so we really finally know what the situation is in North Carolina. Curious how you see your state's new legislative map kind of shaping this election this year, but more hopefully, the next decade. I'm curious for your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I wish it was better news. Our congressional maps got great, so that'll be wonderful because we'll have a much more balanced congressional map, assuming, unfortunately, the GOP actually just appealed them to the Supreme Court, to the U.S. Supreme Court. So we'll see whether or not there's a stay to those. The congressional maps are great. The North Carolina House of Representatives is actually also really good. They have a path to a majority in this decade. They struck a deal. The Senate and Senate leadership, unfortunately, and the GOP was not as gracious and did not want to work with us. It was very cloak and dagger behind closed doors. We've been in a lot of litigation. Basically, North Carolina has been in litigation for the last 10, 12 years with regards to these maps. So they are set for the next decade, shy of something instrumental happening. The good news about the Senate is there's still a path to hold to a super majority for the Republicans and for us to be able to hold the veto for the governor. But it is definitely challenging. I mean, even in my district specifically, they decide there are certain people that they just don't want to continue to be in there. And so my district was politically gerrymandered. It's going to be, it's interestingly an easier race than my other two races that I've already run. But it is very, very clear that they believe that political gerrymandering is perfectly fine in the state of North Carolina. And they have thwarted every effort to have an independent redistricting committee or commission even set up. So there is certainly hope, because I think that as Virginia is now seeing, we need to have at least one chamber that can be the adults, while everything else is happening in the other chamber dealing with the kids. So if nothing else, I hope that at least in this decade, we'll fight in the Senate to, of course, get a majority, but I'm very thankful and grateful that the House will actually have that opportunity in the next couple of cycles.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned that the Republicans have fought having any sort of commission. And, you know, it's interesting because the other two states represented here do have commissions of one type or another. Devil's in the details, very different outcomes, very different structure, very different outcomes. Michigan worked out, well, I mean, nothing's perfect, but Virginia, well, another story there. Delegate Sewell, really curious for your perspective on redistricting. Maybe just a quick synopsis of what exactly happened in Virginia with this process, and how you see the state's new maps setting Democrats up for the next decade.
Yeah, so a very high level overview is that we had a fair redistricting committee. That committee was unable to continue with their work to a point where it was disbanded, and therefore special masters are appointed, and therefore the maps have been drawn for us. So before I even had the chance of being sworn in for my first term in office, these maps were released without many of us even having any expectation for them to come out at the time that they did. They were released. They did not take into consideration any sort of consideration for incumbency. And therefore, we have a host of individuals in both chambers who have been drawn into the same districts. As a result, I think it's really important and something to keep in perspective here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. In our House of Delegates, the 48 of our 100 sitting members have served for 4 years or less. And that is very likely to increase in number based upon these maps. And in our state Senate, the majority of individuals, I think it's 22 of our 40, have been in the state Senate for 13 years or more. That number is too likely to decrease based upon averages and expectations, all based upon the potential for multiple primaries, given the number of incumbents have been drawn in the same districts. We are anticipating some sense of clarity as to whether we have to run this year or not in early March, and hopefully we'll obtain some sense of clarity, but there is still, we're still living in a big gray area, and there's a big sense of the unknown, which adds to the evidence of that brick wall more now than ever before, as we really don't know what the future holds.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey in Virginia for these new maps, but totally agree that the maps provide a path to the majority again for the House and in the Senate, although particular districts have been drawn in certain ways that are really create new challenges, right? It has been a whole mood in Virginia. To end on sort of a positive forward-looking note, we've been doing a lot of thinking, and today certainly been talking a lot about how we can expand our imagination around progressive futures in state legislatures, really thinking about ways that states can be bastions for so much social and political good in our lives. And so in that spirit, would love to know, in your wildest dream for your progressive state, you know, what is that dream, and how could we get there? Senator McMorrow?
Absolutely. And I think this goes back to kind of messaging, the strategy from the other side, especially over the past few years, is just to continue to wear us down. I mean, all of this legislation coming out of Florida and Texas and states around the country is just horrific against anybody who is not straight, white, evangelical Christian. Let's just leave it at that. And that's the strategy, is to wear everybody down, but we have to counter with an optimistic, hopeful future. And here in Michigan, with our redistricting commission, we are looking at a very, very real chance to flip the state Senate for the first time since 1984. And when I'm talking to people about what that means, is that we can finally, in Michigan, run the agenda that we know is going to move the state forward. Michigan should be the state that leads the country and frankly, the world in solving climate change. We are home to the Great Lakes. We are home to more fresh water than any other state in the country. And we are also an incredible home of manufacturing and innovation. This is the home of the American auto industry and the environment. So this is where we are going to experiment. We are going to change mobility. We are going to shift to electrification, and we are going to eliminate PFAS, clean the water. We were hit hard here in Michigan nationally with the Flint water crisis. And now we are seeing that is not an anomaly. It is happening all over the state. It is happening all over the country. But what an opportunity for us to lean in, create amazing jobs. And we will do that when we flip the chamber here in Michigan.
Incredible. What about you, Senator Hashmi? What is your wildest dream for a progressive Virginia? And how do we get there again?
Well, Gabby, I don't think progressive values are a wild dream. I actually think that the progressive values that so many of us espouse and that we run on and that voters elect us into office for are really the heart and soul of what this country is all about. The more I talk to people and engage with so many different constituents and Virginians and even listen to people across the country, we all have the same desires to make sure that our schools are effective and that they're safe and that our communities are healthy and that there are opportunities for everybody and that we are able to focus on the issues that really, really challenge our country. And those are some of those critical issues, of course, is what Senator McMorrow just identified around climate issues, making sure that we are addressing the needs of working families, that there is effective ways of supporting and raising families, and that means addressing the gap in wealth that we have, the disparities on health outcomes. More people that I talk to agree that these are the issues that we need to focus on. So why do we have the disparate outcomes in elections? I think we go right into the heart of what has been holding back our electorate, and those are the access to voting. Here in Virginia, we have made it easier for people to vote, that citizens can engage. We've expanded the days of voting. We've gotten rid of photo IDs. We have given people opportunities to vote on weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. And as a result of that, we see a much more engaged electorate. And so we have to continue to do that. And what we're seeing the GOP do in so many states is try to tamp down that access to voting, because they know that the more that people vote, they're going to vote for the values that we are already engaging in. And so I really hope that we continue to focus our attention on voting, on rights to voting, and making sure that we are able to get communities out so that we can all begin to progress on these values that we know are so critical and so important to everybody in this country.
And shared. I think that's so incredibly resonant, Senator, because you're right. From having clean water to drink to having the right to vote, these are shared American values, and they're what we're all working toward. And so, it's so inspiring. I know I've just been looking through the chat. Folks are so grateful to hear and be inspired by the work that you're all doing. You are the reason why we have this this organization, truly. And it's an incredible honor to stand alongside you still during this phase of your work. We have some time for Q&A, so I'd love to turn things over to Ray to moderate a few questions for our panelists.
Thank you so much, Gabby. Delegate, senators, thank you so much for your time, for joining us today, and for sharing your experience with us. We are so proud to have supported you and continue to support you. And I'm sure you can see it in the chat. Peppered in among the questions were just a lot of outpouring of support for you and gratefulness for your work in your legislatures. So I think one question that came in is if you could kind of go back to before the first time you ran for office. I think one of the studies has shown that for everyone on here is a woman, and it takes about 7 asks for a woman to run for office. So we're curious for you, what was it that inspired you to finally take that plunge? And how can we encourage more women like you to choose to run? And I might start with Delegate Sewell, since you've been doing a lot of work in this space before you decided to run last year.
Yeah, well, great question. And it's a pleasure to be here with you all. And great. I'm excited to answer this. For me, I had been asked to run. I was in a very interesting position. Delegate at the time, Hala Ayala, who ran for statewide office to be our next lieutenant governor and ran a hard-fought battle. Just made the conscious decision that someone was needed here at the statewide level to serve Virginians, and she was willing to step up for that task. And she called me as a friend, and I thought she was just seeking like advice on the process. And I reassured her that I thought she was doing a great thing. And then eventually she flipped the switch on me and asked me to run for her seat. And I think the answer I gave her was not only no, but hell no. And I said, I love working behind the scenes and appreciated the vote of confidence, but there's no way. And then I got really pissed off because at the beginning of the pandemic, people were not showing up for their community and the place that I call home. My hometown is located 30 minutes outside Washington, D.C., the 10th most diverse county in the nation. And still, so many people didn't know what resources were available to them, who they could turn to for assistance at the start of the pandemic. And I was headed to work where I was working in local government at that moment in time when they were trying to cut and stop our local bus service, commuter bus service, while we had first responders and those who are working at our grocery stores and essential roles who are just simply trying to get to work. And it was raining that day. And I got very, very angry. And I said, damn it, here I go. Called Hala and said, I'm in, and I never turned back. And I think that was one of the best decisions I ever made. I wasn't fighting for me. I was fighting for my hometown. And I get to tell that story every day. And I never lose sight of it.
That is incredible and so inspiring. Yeah. And I think I might pass it on to Senator Batch. What inspired you to run for office, and how might we inspire others to also run?
So I think, I was, the first time I was asked was when my children were 1 and 3, and I said my children are 1 and 3. And for those of you who don't know, North Carolina is a part-time legislature. So you get $13,000, but really we are a full-time legislature because we're still in the long session of last year. So it's very, very difficult to find people to be able to serve in office. And so that was the end of that conversation. And then when my kids were 5 and 7, my 5-year-old was about to enter into kindergarten, someone approached me again, asked, and I had a longer conversation, which led to me running for the North Carolina House in 2018. And I think what really finally got me to say yes was the fact that when I looked at the government that we currently have, I believe that a government should look like the people it serves, and it usually doesn't. And so when I looked at our North Carolina General Assembly, there were very few women of color. When I actually was sworn in, there were only 4 women in the North Carolina House of 120 members who had school-age children. There were an increasingly lower number of people who, of course, did not, that were not lawyers anymore. There were less than 24% of people of color and women. And so the list goes on and on and on. And then you pair that with my life experience with regards to what I do every single day and actually working with families and realizing that the legislation that was being passed in the General Assembly was not rooted in anything in reality. It was very disconnected. I decided that I needed to take that skill set and then also all the other lived experiences that I have to the table to finally start working for the people in my district. So it's been great ever since, and we're all still willing to do it.
Amazing. Well, you're actually really keying on another question that I saw come through the chat in a lot of different ways, which is you're all women again in this panel, and especially young women, women of color. And I'm curious, how do those identities, how do they impact the way that you come to the legislature? Whether it's the way you communicate, the kinds of legislation you bring forward, anything else that you feel is important. And I might start with Senator McMorrow.
Absolutely. You know, I think that the point that representation matters is very true. When I was elected, I became the youngest woman ever elected to the Senate in Michigan, and I am in my mid-30s. And that brings a whole host of issues. You know, when I ran and we flipped a district that has always been Republican against an incumbent in what was one of the most expensive races, what was surprising to me was I thought I would be ruled out by a lot of people for my age, but I talked to a lot of residents here who said, you remind me so much of my daughter who left Michigan and went to Chicago or Denver or New York or California. And what is it about this place that brought you back? And what can we do to keep our kids here so that they want to raise kids and raise families? And that was the connector. And that voice wasn't present in our Senate, in our legislature, which skews much, much older and tends to be independently wealthy white men. So especially now as a new mom in the legislature and somebody who gave birth actually while in office, I decided to take leave with my daughter, which, believe it or not, we do not have a policy for legislators because it's so rare that it even happens. And in a swing district, I knew that it was a political risk to do that because we do not have proxy voting. We don't have remote voting. There's no systematic way for us to continue to participate. So it just meant that I missed votes while I was gone. And we've used that to really highlight the challenges. And I had such an outpouring from moms sharing their own challenges of not having access to leave, not having access to childcare. And we have introduced a lot of legislation around things as simple as requiring companies to disclose their leave policies upfront so that women do not have to be afraid to ask about those policies. Because I heard from women who said, I'm not even going to ask because then I'm going to be ruled out of the process. So it really does matter, and it informs our process every day. And I think something that for somebody like all of us in a swing district, I've introduced now over 40 bills. None have passed into law. Many have been stolen, and we take credit for them when they do pass under somebody else's name, and we celebrate them. But it is realizing that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength, that you can share your stories, that you can be candid, and it's going to allow people to connect with you, to share their challenges so that you can be their voice and put that legislation forward. It's going to help, particularly right now, women, young moms, single moms, to get back into the workforce with a system that's going to work for them.
Thank you so much, Senator. I think we have one more minute. So Senator Hashmi, how has your identity as a woman of color impacted your work or informed your work as a state senator?
Well, thank you for that question. And I think we've heard already from our other three speakers how very, very critical this representation is. And my hat's off to all of these women who are in office and also caring for young children. I know that I personally could not have done that. I needed the income, my family needed the income, and my children, I had to spend time making sure that they were being taken care of. And so we have structures in place that really prevent women, and particularly women with families, from being engaged in the political process. And that's a serious issue we need to address if we want to make sure that women's concerns, which are family concerns, are front and center in our political discussions. And so it's really important. So thank you to all these trailblazers who are doing that. I decided to run for office when I was 54 years old, when I was in a position and my family was in a position to release me from earning an income to support the family. As we've already heard, we are not paid adequately. Even though this is a full-time job, we get a very, very limited salary. As a woman of color in particular, I found that there were systems in place to prevent me from running for office. I was told that I was not electable. And I think at the heart of that message that so many of us receive is the fact that we don't have the kind of networks it takes to raise money to run these massive campaigns. I was looking at a $2.5 million campaign when I first decided to run. I had no network. I was outside of the political circles. And so it was an immense hurdle, but I think that's not unique to me. It's not unique to women of color. It's just simply unique to women in general. And the more that we can do to bring in opportunities and support and resources to address these concerns that prevent women in general from running, then we will see more women having the opportunity to engage, and we'll see these critical issues getting the kind of attention that they need in our state legislatures as well as in federal government.
Thank you so much to our panelists. It's been an absolute delight to catch up. And as I said before, you are the reason we do this work. And it is our mission and our goal and our vision to have legislatures full of reflective representatives who really do reflect the diversity and the experience, the lived experiences of this country. And so incredibly grateful that you spent some time with us today. Thank you all for all the questions. And at this point, I'd love to turn things back over to Lala.
Thank you so much, Gabby. Thank you so much to our panelists and Sister District alum, Senators McMorrow, Senator Hashmi, Senator Batch, Delegate Sewell. Thank you all so much for being here and for your service. We're so incredibly proud to have supported you, and we are rooting for you as you wake up at 5 a.m. and juggle your responsibilities, as you work diligently behind the scenes to find unlikely allies. And as Senator Batch said, working as diligent peahens, not posturing peacocks, all to push for a progressive future on so many issues like affordable childcare, gun safety, climate change, fighting election subversion, and so much more. We're so, so grateful. So before we close out, I want to say a huge thank you to all of you for being here. And for those of you who signed up as new monthly donors, we set a goal of 50 new monthly donors this weekend. And I just heard from Lindsay, our development director, that we're already at 32 new monthly donors. So this is incredible to see, and I cannot emphasize enough how incredibly important these recurring donations are to helping us lay a strong foundation of fundraising that enables the kind of long-term planning that, as we have talked about earlier today, is just so desperately needed in the ecosystem in the progressive space. So thank you again. If you have not signed up yet, please do. The QR code is on the screen, and thank you again. So on behalf of everyone here, on Sister District staff, and I just want to say thank you for being here. We can't wait to see you here again tomorrow, same time, same place. We've got another really exciting day of panels, including one on election subversion that you do not want to miss. We've got leading thinkers as well as a legislator from Arizona, which, as Gabby said, is on the front lines of the election subversion fight. And really other great sessions as well, including a session with our organizing and political director, Jarvis Houston, and our field manager, Taylor Hoagland, for a look under the hood about the strategic advice and the partnership and collaboration that we offer to campaigns to make sure that as strong as possible, offering this up as a complement to our grassroots field and fundraising that all of you provide so that we can get to winning campaigns, building these majorities in our key battleground states. And so we can make a difference, make a change, fight against all of the terrible things that are coming down the pike from the Republicans, but so that we can fight for a progressive future, a world for all of us to live in that reflects our shared values. So thank you again. We're actually got a few minutes to wrap up. If anybody has any questions, wants to pop them in the chat, happy to answer them, but otherwise, we're just going to say thank you so much, give you a few minutes back of your day. Really, really excited to see you here again tomorrow.